Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It is Sunday night. Let me just find something so I can click it. Yes, the chat broke. In fixing one thing, it seems something else has broke. And I didn't realise until I went to try it now. Hello, I hope you are all safe and well. And I hope the live stream is working. ELRS Gemini. Yeah, we'll talk about that. I couldn't fit everything into the stream tonight. We need to put that in. BetaFPV. Let me put that in. Hello. I hope it is all working. I hope we will get through it. I have done a sort of a workaround for the chat on the side there. In the process of fixing my issues last week, I have now realised I've broken chat, and now that means I'm going to have to do something to fix it. I've actually lost the browser source is what I've lost, which means I can't show chat, but we're showing it that way. So look, we're going to go with the basic way of doing it, which I think works. No, we are on NVINC. We are back on NVINC. We are back to normal. I did a quick live stream in the week for those who didn't see, to see how it's behaving. And I think we've solved all of the problems we had last week. Believe it or not, it was a plugging issue was what it was. And I now understand why. And I did explain that on the stream the other day. And I've ended up having to delete all of the plugins, which I only just realized includes, I've deleted the Chrome plugin, which now means I couldn't do live chat. But we've got a chat up on the screen, so you can see that one. We'll go with the YouTube chat. I added a window source and threw that on instead. Now, I do have a cup of tea. I also have a pack of chocolate biscuits, which I had, and they vanished. Where have they gone? They are there. And just to prove I have biscuits and tea, that is the strength of the tea that I am dealing with tonight. For those tea aficionados out there who like to know how strong the tea is, you can measure that in the scale of darkness. It tastes nice as well. Now, let me adjust my desk. I'd lowered it earlier, which builder's tea. Yeah, it's got to be a builder's tea. I've gone for a builder's tea and builder's haircut as well, actually, at the moment, as you'll probably notice. Anyways, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Have we got some stuff to talk about tonight? So we have some new motors, in fact. It should term to use new and motors, because it is the first time that Mr. Chris Rosser, who is behind AOS RC, has released a set of motors, and quite a week it has been around them, and we're going to talk about the motors. We're then going to drift into a controversial subject and talk a little bit about creators making products in the space that they review in. And actually, let me rephrase that. Reviewers making products in the space that they review. And I have got some thoughts on that, and I want to talk about it because it is an interesting subject, and there has been a lot of interesting feedback around Chris releasing his motors, and I want to talk about that specifically in a minute, and I need to get some provisos and some things out of the way on that too. We're going to talk, as someone has mentioned, about the BetaFPV new ELRS Gemini. And we will talk about whatever else comes up and whatever else I've put in the title of this video that I've already forgotten about. DJI Goggles 2 update, minor update, and a few other things as well. And as always, we will answer any questions that you may have in the chat as we go along too. Now, I'm going to get the shilling out of the way first of all. Super chats are not required, but they are welcome if you do want to support the channel. I will just make sure I've got that where I can see them. If anybody does want to donate, they are there, but I will answer any questions without them as well. Good evening to you. How you doing? I'm the OG. How are you, Mike? Failsafe. How you doing, mate? Builder's Tea. Someone just said, I like buying products from creators. Yeah, and look, there is nothing wrong with that. But there is a very interesting set of subjects, and this very much rolls into the GNLTT thing as well. And I'm going to start, actually, and I'm going to make sure that I'm going to be crystal clear. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the new motors from AOS RC, who behind AOS RC is Chris Rosser. Chris Rosser is someone who I class as a friend in FPV. I haven't spoken to him for a while, actually. But he's someone I've spoke to a number of times. Spent a lot of time on the phone with Chris, actually. He is a super intelligent, very clever, and a very good guy. And I'm going to get that out the way first of all. However, he has also released a product, and I, being me, will always keep things separate. So I will have my opinions on the product. I will have my opinions on what I feel is right and wrong for a reviewer to do, and what I feel in right and wrong is for each person to do. But that is just my opinion. None of these opinions are ever personal. They're never meant to be hate against a person or cause hate or for anyone to have anything but understanding on what I think, because I am someone who predominantly deals in opinion. My reviews are opinion based on a product. My comments are opinion based on situations. That is what I offer here, and some people will accept them and some people don't, and that's absolutely fine, but I'm going to give them nonetheless. And I want to explain a bit around that as well, and really, because I do have some strong opinions on creators, not creators, let me rephrase that, reviewers selling products in the same space that they're reviewing in. And I also have some acceptables and get outs for that as well, which we will talk through. And so much so, I've even put myself a list together to make sure I stay on topic tonight with this stuff. And I think it is a super interesting subject, because it's how we navigate in these waters and what is right and what is wrong. And Chris is not the only one. We have JB, who has his signature editions, his frame, his flight controller. Look, and I absolutely think some of that stuff is absolutely fine. And there is a point where I think, not so much, but we'll talk about that as we move through it anyway. But again, it's not to say anyone should take my opinion as fact, and it's as simple as that. So the first thing we're going to do is talk about the motors, because they are a new product and they absolutely warrant being talked about. So if we hop to the desktop, AOS have released what they're calling their Supernova, labeled 2207 1980 kV. So 1980 kV. And yes, we'll get into the 2207 in a minute. These are motors that Chris has designed based on the testing that he has done. I believe he said on over 50 motors. And as a result of that testing, he's put together a tool which allows him to do over 20,000 variations. And he has come up with what he is saying, because let's be crystal clear in that the only evidence we have is based on Chris's data. And he is saying that they can offer up to 18% more thrust, 4.6 more efficiency, and 33% more torque. Okay? So that is what Chris is saying. And that is how we have to label this. Now, the motors themselves are made by RC Empower on his behalf. They are not just a set of Wasp majors redesigned or changed. These motors have been customized, made for Chris by RC Empower to his specification. Now, I have to say, I have known about these for, it might be 3 months. I can't remember when Chris told me. That was the last time we spoke, in fact, was about 3 months ago. And he did tell me his plans and, you know, look, that it was all very looking good, cool. And we had a chat about some of the stuff I'll talk about tonight. And if we look at them there, I like the color scheme. They look really interesting. You know, from Chris's video, if you haven't seen it, I would suggest go watching Chris's video. He then has a interview where he goes into things a little bit more with Joshua Bardwell, aka JB. And they're both worth a look. Okay, just to explain. Overall, I'm going to keep it really basic. They're a premium motor. They are based on Chris's design. They have a thicker metal bell than other motors, which I am guessing means they've got thinner magnets, but I could be wrong because we don't have full spec on this, and we will talk about that in a minute. And they are being sold as one of the most powerful motors available today in this size category. And they are offering benefits. And that is the data that Chris is telling us. There is no other data point other than what Chris is telling us. Okay. And that's the same pretty much for all motors. And there is some specs published, which is here, which tells us some of the information around the motors. And there is some interesting stuff in here, especially when you look at the current draw, right? These motors will pull on GemFam 51466Rs, and it's not the same prop, but it's a similar size prop. 100% throttle, they're saying 60 amp. Now, just to give you an idea, the Zing 2s are 35 amp in that same setup. Okay, so there are some interesting things here. Overall, I think the motors look interesting. There's some real interesting data, and I think it's going to be good to see how people get on with them. Now, there is a lot to unpack here with regards to what was said in the video around the sizing. Now, just to be clear, Chris has said the sizings are labeled 2207, but they're not actually 2207. And he has then gone on to ask that if people get a set of motors, don't share those numbers if you measure them. Or try not to. He'd rather people didn't. Now, that is an interesting statement to make, and I'll share my thoughts on that in a minute. What we first of all have to unpack is the fact that the motors are not actually 2207. Now, we don't know what they are. They might be 2206.8, or they could be 2109s. We don't know. Now, I don't like the fact that they're being labeled as 2207 and are not 2207. I frankly don't care what the size is. What I care about is data accuracy. And what we're getting into here is a situation of equivalence. They are equivalent to a 2207, or they're in that area. And I don't like that, and I don't agree that should be done, because that is a dangerous precedent for all the other manufacturers to now go, well, he doesn't call his the actual number they are, so we aren't going to call them the actual number they are. Now, the reality is we don't know how far off they are. If it's so small, it could be like cars being called 2 litre when they're actually 1968, which is very common. However, this is an area I don't particularly like. about the way they're being marketed. And I would have preferred them to have been marketed as 5-inch motors. And they should either have their correct size on them or they shouldn't have a size at all. I think it is not great for the industry to say they are something that they're not, and then in a video say, but they're not actually this. Will the packaging say anyway that they're not actually this? Will the spec sheet say anyway that they're not actually this? And I think it is a dangerous precedent for users, and I don't agree with it. I also found it amusing when Chris did say that he wished people wouldn't share it. That's like a red rag to a bull, because you know someone's going to do it, and I'm not going to be the first person to do it, but someone will. But I can tell you now, if those motors were here in front of me, I would be measuring that status size and sharing it with you. Because I have torn apart every product I have ever received if I felt it necessary. And if Cadex said we don't want people to show the inside, or someone said that, I am going to do it. I'm the person that puts everything up on repair.wiki. So I'm sorry. I would be sharing it if I have it. I don't have it. I don't. If that would upset AOS, Chris, so be it. I don't care. Sorry, but I don't feel that's a great thing to ask, unless it's a marketing ply just to steer up, get people going. I did try to order one, but they're out of stock. Oh, they didn't actually have any when I looked. And look, the size is going to come out. However, I'm not a person that really reviews motors. So what I'm also not going to do is rush out and order one just to show you what the size is, because that would be me being pedantic. And, you know, I haven't done that with any other motor, so why would I do it on Chris's? So I'm not going to be the one to run out and do that, if you get my meaning. You know, for me to go and order one and then show you the size, that would just be me doing it to make a point, and I'm not going to do that. But I don't agree that the way they're being marketed. Okay. Now, these are a premium motor that are offering some really good performance according to Chris's numbers, and all we can do is wait and see. At the end of the day, these are a premium motor. They're about $23, £24 in the UK, and they're about $28 in the US. Now, Chris is saying, you know, 30% more efficient, more powerful. I'm not being funny. If a high-end motor wasn't 30 or 40% more powerful, there is sort of something wrong. I think I would be a lot more excited if these motors were the same price as a set of Zing 2s. And then I would think it's innovation. What I don't feel is huge innovation is a premium motor being better than another premium motor, or a premium motor being better than a cheap motor. There is a price point to performance to durability balance here. And a top-end priced motor being X percentage better than a mid-end motor really is no crap Sherlock territory for me. And that's the thing. So it's hard to be excited when they're that price. Now, if this was a product that was in the £18, $20 category, I think that would be incredibly interesting. And I'm not saying they're too expensive. I'm just saying they're not that exciting at that price point. Now, what we don't know is... What we do know is Chris has made these motors based on a huge amount of testing, based on a tool he's helped design, based on some other stuff, and on a dyno and everything. They look fantastic. What we don't really have here, though, is real-world tests. And that is the bit that remains to be seen on these motors, is how are they for durability? How are they for longevity? How do they survive a crash? What's the clearances like between the bell and the stator? You know, Is it super close tolerance to give it the best possible performance, but any piece of grit gets in there and it's going to crash? It's a complicated situation. We just don't know, and we're going to have to wait for real-world testing. I am ordering a set as soon as I can to get him in, and I will talk about them. But what I won't do is sit here and tell you I think they're better or worse than this motor or that motor. I'll give an opinion, but I'm not a motor reviewer, and I'm not going to just turn into a motor reviewer overnight. But I'm going to still give an opinion on them when I get a set in. And I'm actually going to build them probably on Vanover's new frame, because I like Vanny's new frame. The Vanny Pro looks really, really nice. So that's that side of it. Now, I think they're interesting. I'm going to get a set. I like what Chris has done. I'm really interested to see how they go. You do have other very good quality motors on the market. The RC and Power Wasps. These were by Chris's own data. Very good. And these have got to be worth a look as well. And I'll be interested to... I might buy a set of each to see. And it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting. Now, as I've said, that is the motors. This now leads me on to my second point here. And this next conversation is more about people reviewing products, then going on to making products. Because Chris now, again falls into this category. And I want to be crystal clear here. Some of the stuff I'm going to talk about now has been stuff that's been mentioned to me. It's a conversation that I've had on my Discord, on Facebook, and other places. Some of this I think is valid. Some of this I think is not. And I'll share my final opinion on it at the end. Now, there is some real question marks to be had over reviewers making products in the area that they're reviewing. So, let me give you a scenario. I'm reviewing motors. I create a setup for reviewing motors, and I speak to a bunch of motor companies and say, hey, I'd love to review your motor on the channel. I'm going to put a video out. I'm going to show it in a chart. Would you send me some to do? And I do my reviews and make all of my data and put together that data. And then I use that data to then go and produce my own product. Now, this is a very strange situation, because what you're getting is you're going to manufacturers potentially on the guise of, I'm going to give an opinion on your motor, but what I'm actually doing in the background is data mining all of these products, using them to be able to make my own one to compete with you later. So this raises some interesting questions. I know as a reviewer, I get sent things and told things that I wouldn't share, but are also only told because I am in the review space. If manufacturers thought I was then using that as a platform to release my own product, I know for a fact they either wouldn't be happy or they wouldn't send me them. Now, and I didn't actually think of this, but someone brought this up actually on my Discord, and it was very much, how many of those 50 motors that were tested were bought? How many of the 50 motors that were tested were given under the guise of providing reviews or adding to a motor chart, and not under the guise of producing data to then go and make my own competing product? And it is a very interesting situation. I never even imagined this or thought of this. It'd be like me receiving all of the, getting the DJI, the Avatar HD gear, and then in the background designing my own competing system and then going, hey, they sent me all of this stuff, and based on all of that, I'm going to release this. I think it's weird territory. I definitely think it's weird territory. Now, with regards to reviewers making products that in the segment they review in, my overall personal opinion is it should not happen. Okay? I don't believe you can make a product and review a product and be impartial. And even if you can be impartial, it completely brings into question what you've done. Furthermore, there are, in my opinion, get-outs on this. Signature editions are not making products. So if you take, and a real great example of this is the JB TX16. It is a signature radio. It isn't a radio that didn't exist before JB. It isn't a radio that is only available in that version. It is a radio that has a customization as a result of a color scheme or a theme or even some features. But at the end of the day, I don't personally have a problem with things like that. I also are the same with frames, because I think frames are very easy to call out bullshit and nonsense than things like motors. So for instance, you can sell a frame and say it's optimized for O3, like we had with JB's, and it wasn't JB who said that, remember, it was the marketing material. And everyone looked at that and went, really? Is it though? And that got changed. So there is some self-policing in that side of things. Where it then gets a bit awkward is things like motors, flight controllers, and everything else, frankly, that other people make that you've reviewed and you're now saying, actually, I've learned a lot. And don't get me wrong, people like me and Chris and JB, we see all of the stupid things companies do. We see the things that people think, you know what, I could do that better. But unfortunately, being in the position I'm in, I don't feel I can. And that's my personal opinion. Now, I do think Chris has wandered into very strange waters here, and waters we haven't really been in before, because basically he produced a whole set of test data based on motors he was either bought or was provided for review, and has then gone on to use that data to design his own motor, which he then says is better than everyone else's, and he's going to sell, and he's not going to make that data available. The data he used, his program, isn't available. And it is now in this territory of, I've used it and I'm selling a product and I'm benefiting from it. And this is the problem. This is where I think it gets murky. Now, as a reviewer myself, I now have to treat Chris and these motors just like I would Cadex, just like I would Fat Shark, just like I would anyone else. I cannot be me and not criticize where I feel people are wrong. And I am uncomfortable with a whole set of motor tests being pushed out to the community, which we thought is fantastic, and now being shown a motor which we're being told was based on those tests is better than the rest. And now you start going, well, hold on a minute, were those tests legit? And I'm not saying Chris is lying, but it just says, you sort of go, well, is that legit? Were they done in such a way that they could benefit this, but not that? And then in 3 months' time, I'm going to do this, which means it'll be top of that chart. It just all gets really, really messy. Now, I'm going to be crystal clear. I don't believe for 1 minute Chris would have done anything untoward. As far as I'm aware, he is a stand-up bloke. But the problem you have is you can't mix the two, in my opinion. And that's my thoughts. And it's down to each person to decide what they think. At the end of the day, it's down to each person to decide what they feel they can happy with and what they feel they can't. And I know I am not going to be a popular person talking about this and highlighting this, but I still have my overall opinion, and that opinion would be the same whether it was anyone else. Now, I'm going to be clear with you. You ain't ever seeing me selling a product that already exists in FPV. I have about 3 things in my head that I've thought of that basically don't exist that I think would be handy. But they're not really products that exist. But I'll never get round to doing it. And even if I did, I would then have to completely separate myself off and go, I will never talk about or review those products again. And that would be that case. And it's weird. It's a weird searcher. So on my notes, we talked about creative selling products. As I said, I do have provisos for, I think signature editions is fine. I think frames is fine. Genuinely, I just don't think there's a problem with frames. I think there are question marks over receiving products for review and then later using the data or information you have gleaned from those products to then produce your own competing product. It brings into question the validity and the impartiality of that data originally, especially if you are the only person providing that data. That doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong, but it still raises questions over the data in the first place. I am not saying for 1 minute Chris has lied. I am not saying for 1 minute Chris is being disingenuous. But what I am saying is I now personally look at all of that original data and bring it all into question and want to see some other way of how we do it. At the end of the day, these motors will be what they will be. They are out there. You can buy them. People will like them or they won't. As for how people decide to handle, is there going to be any more motor testing? Is there going to be, how that moves forward? I don't know. And we'll just deal with it as we move along. What I do know is the testing data he provided was amazingly interesting. I'm not saying it was fully real world because people have questioned that data before. And there are people who agree with it and don't agree with it. But it is what it is. Now, another thing I just want to touch on this before really I answer any questions and I want to catch up on the super chats. At the end of the day, people selling stuff are trying to make a living, right? People think they're... Oh, the chat flipped out then. Did you see that? At the end of the day, no one should be upset with anyone for trying to make a living out of YouTube or FPV. If they're providing good products, no one will care. At the end of the day, Chris is trying to pay his bills, and I wish him all the best with that. I hope the motor lives up to everything he has said it is, because he has put it on a high pedestal, and I hope it is. I think the only two things I'm really disappointed in is I would love these motors to have been in the $20 category. And I think what would have been great is if this tool and this data had been open sourced and provided to the FPV world for free, and then Chris made his motors and almost gone, look, I did all of this testing and reviews. Here is the program, the data, the testing and everything. And based on all of this, I've made my own vision of a motor, which I think is the optimum, and I'm going to sell it. And that, I think, would have been a great way forward. What will happen? What is inevitable is you can guarantee all of the motor manufacturers will be looking at this going, so what have they done here? They'll get one in. They'll tear it apart. We'll see some copycats. We'll see some improvements. It'll filter down. It's going to happen. I just think the way the data was originally collated makes me feel, especially if the motors were provided as review samples for free, that should then be put in the public domain. And that's really where I stand on it. And genuinely, I wish Chris all the best with them. I think they are definitely looking to be a nice motor. I'm looking forward to putting a set on the bench because they just look really nice. But they are dear. And look, there's a real question of, are you better spending money on high-end motors or middle-end motors? You know, it's hard to say. It's hard to say. Chris has published the testing data, and I think if you want the full testing data, it's available on his Discord. So I think you need to join his Discord to get the full testing data. That's really it. So that's my thoughts. As I said, I've seen a lot of comments on this where I've seen people being very, hateful. I don't see the point of that. And I've seen comments on this where people being overly, I don't see a problem here. At the end of the day, we all have our opinion. Opinions are like crevices. We all have one. But I fundamentally believe you can't be a retailer, a manufacturer, and a reviewer. You can only be one, and you can't mix these things up. And there's a point where you have to, if you want to be one, then you've got to stop being the other. You can't be impartial and have skin in the game. And even if you can walk the line, you can be as genuine as you want. It's really hard to do. Oh, just catching down the chat. I see Nick Burns. Hello, Nick. How are you? How many days before the manufacturer of these motors comes out with their own at a lower price point? I do think, on a personal note, I think it was a bit silly to say, please don't share the size, unless he wants you to share the size. If these motors turn out to be 2207, Chris was thinging us, rickrolling everyone. It'll be amusing, but it will also be disappointing because you just don't want, Okay, hey mate, enjoy the content. Thank you for that. And it's a weird position. And look, at the end of the day, this all has bugger all to do with me. I'm sticking my oar in where it's A, not wanted, and B, really not needed. But at the end of the day, I'm going to give an opinion on something when it is the size of it. And look, you don't get to know is a common term. And I think it's a bit of a silly thing to do, but it is what it is. Yeah, people have said Chris has filed a patent. I didn't read he filed a patent on the motor. I heard is he filed the patent on the frame, the changes to the frame. I read it as the frame, not the motors. It's in JB's video. Yeah, that's what the dampening patent. And for those who didn't see that, it's worth checking out. It's interesting. But look, it is what it is. Yeah, there was a meme roaming round. There has been someone posted one on Facebook I saw earlier. I think what will be weird is if these motors are well off 2207, like if they're like I think, based on what I looked at, right, on these motors, like when I looked at the size, and you can't ignore this chart will probably be complete nonsense, right? But they are not as wide as a set of Zings. Okay, Zing 2s are 29mm, these are 27s, but they're taller. I think these are going to have a smaller and taller stator. Because remember, look, it's not as wide, okay, as a set of Zing 2s. It's 27 versus 29.6 off the top of my head. Yet Chris has already said it's got a thicker metal band, which makes me think he's either had to take the magnets down. Zings do have quite a curved bell, though. That is a very good point. But I'm wondering if it's taller, narrower and taller. Are we going to see something like a 2109 or something, or 2108? Something like that is what I'm thinking. They do look exquisitely well made. They do look exquisitely well made. And I know there's people with these in hands already, so I am shocked no one has posted the size yet. I think it's probably taller. Yeah, I think we're going to be like 2104 by 2104 by. It's very hard for me to zoom in on this. Right there. Let me... Oh, I've messed up. They do look very, very nice. Exquisite price too. Yeah, look, they're a premium motor. They should be bloody good for the money. At the end of the day, though, here's a question, and here's a genuine question. How many people flying 6S, Zing 2s, 6S, feel they don't have enough power? That's the reason you go to 6S. You know, look, the Zing 2s, I like the Zing 2s. I got tons of the Zing 2s here. They're one of my favourite motor, just because I think the price point's decent on them, and they survive. They're okay. I don't feel at 6S I've ever wanted more power. 4S on these. Yeah, and I can imagine that. 12S, send it. Yeah. So, look, that's probably me in more trouble than I've ever wanted to be in. It is what it is. I wish Chris all the best with them. We'll probably have a catch-up at some point, or he won't. He may never speak to me again, but it is what it is. At the end of the day, look, I can only share my opinions on them. I think the motor looks interesting. Beginner here, Wasp Major says in the description, for sub 250 builds, it would be Supernova, be similar to... Just having a look. Not for sub 250 builds, no. No, Zing 2s are a decent motor. You can't go wrong with a set of Zing 2s. You really can't. So, did someone say there was stock in the UK? Did someone post just now that there was stock? I got some OG purple Zing Pros. Yeah, I got a few of the older Zings here as well. I got some of the old Reddies. No, Hobby RC are out and Unmanned Aerial Tech are out as well. I did search around. I don't know if anyone else. They was put out of stock. Yeah, the E-Pros on the Zings, really good money. They're like £13 a motor, I think. You can't knock that. And if you think about the price, you know, hi from Brazil, how are you? Right. Anyways, that's the controversy. That's me in trouble. Let's move on. But before we move on, I just want to say thank you to the guys on the Super Chats. We have had one from, actually, I can't quite read it from here. We've had 5 BGNs saying keep it up. Thank you very much from AT, I think it's ATI XHD. And then Pat Pasta is given $4.99 as well, saying thank you for the HDZero help. Thank you, my friend. I do appreciate it. High temp enamel coating. Yes, 260 degrees military grade, apparently. And he did say they're going to be unsmokable. The problem is, are they uncrashable? That's the key, isn't it? And look, as you say, you cannot knock a set of Zings. I do wonder, I think we also know what the new Zings are going to look like. Ah, Pat Pasta. Sorry, mate. I've got that one is on a... on an angle. I can't quite see it properly on that motor. I suspect it's military-grade enamel wire. There is also a lot of nonsense being posted about these motors by some vendors as well. Some of the write-ups I read were like, really? Really? Okay, now, before I move on to the next subject, I want to talk about a couple of things. Tomorrow is going to be the HDZero review video going live. Look, I'm going to be honest with you guys. I have 4 reviews I'm trying to finish, and the weather in the UK here is just making it impossible. I've also had man flu this week, but I've managed to get a little bit of flight time on the HDZero again to make sure it's working correctly, and the review will go up tomorrow. Nothing shocking. VTX is great. Nothing really to worry about. Crack on and buy it. I have 3 reviews I am trying to finish. I have the new 4-inch iFlight Evoke Nazgul. I have the Defender 16, and I have, finally, it came in for those who saw the live stream the other day, the what is it? I've forgotten. Flylens 85 from Flywheel. And I'll be honest, it's just impossible here for me to fly. There is a very real possibility I'm going to be doing a bench lookover, and whilst at the start I've said I want to take them for a fly, I may have to do that as a part 2. For those who live in Wales or live in South Wales and other weather in the UK, we have hit winter, and it's just horrific. It's constant wind and rain at the moment. I'm now at the point where I pretty much can't fly for 4 months of the year. It's just horrible here at the moment. It just has been continuous. This week it's just been bad. And I can't sit on these videos forever, in the sense of I don't like putting out, I can't, it's not a review. If you don't fly it, it's not a review, that's for sure. But it's just really hard to get videos finished here this time of year. It really is. So I don't know. Yeah, my house isn't even big enough to do this. My house is very small. I live in a shoebox. It's just horrific. It's just, you know, I think we're on like our 12th day of rain. We had a little stop in the week. I had like a 4-hour break where I could go and get warm as hell today. Nice, Craig. Thank you for that. I think it's just been just down here. It's just horrific. And the worst thing is, it's just how wet everything is. Try not, you know, I stuck the HDZero craft into the mud because I flew it a little bit to see how far I could get. And it's just bad. It's just bad. I'm also struggling a bit at the moment as well. I'm really struggling. Yeah, I won't go into that, but it's just not good. Just not good. Yeah, it's been really hard this year. It has. But no. Right. The next subject to touch on quickly. Okay, so this week, DJI pushed out an update for the DJI Goggles 2 and the Integras. Now, it's a small update. It doesn't affect O3, but what it does bring is support on the Goggles 2 for the DJI Air 3. Now, that in itself may not sound important, but it actually is, because the DJI Air 3 is an O4 based drone. It isn't based on O3. It is based on the new DJI S2 chipset. It is the first drone to be released with the new S2 chipset. And this update is the first official proof that there is capability of compatibility between O3 and O4. Now, I have always known this is the case, that there's nothing magical here with O4. O4 is a small step forward of O3. It's more under the hood changes. But this is the first official DJI compatibility between an O3 product and an O4 product. Now, what this means for the future, we don't know. Does it mean there will be an updated version of O3 to be O4? I actually think we may see O4 come quicker than you think, but that isn't because DJI will want to rush out a change. I think, I said this on last week's stream, I think they may be running out of the early chipsets. Remember, O3 uses the P1 still, and I don't think they're going to be producing that for much longer. I think we could see a mid-refresh on 03 to 04, and what you'd probably get is the goggles all support it, new ear unit, which works backwards and forwards, and they just call it 04, and they'll just say it's got better something. I don't know. Farting capability. But it is the first official backwards compatibility. So whilst it isn't interesting, the update, it's interesting. If that's the case, yes. So Paolo has asked, would the Vista go out of production? Yes. And I think we will see the end of the Vista this year. I think the Vista's on borrowed time. Big style. Big style. Big style. I think the Vista's on borrowed time. I don't think it'll be long. In before the new goggles are named Goggles 1. Yeah, DJI have potentially got new goggles around the corner, but we don't know what they are. We do have some info. But yeah, chances are Vista won't be long. But that isn't to say they could. Well, you can't really make a Vista with a new chipset. Yeah, they could actually do that, AVI. Yeah, could they update it with the new chipset? They could. Absolutely. They could just do complete under-the-hood changes, and moving to the new chipset would actually save them space, not increase space. I don't think they'd be able to make it any smaller because you're only taking one chip smaller, but they would save some space in the 03A unit. Yeah, they could replace the P1 with the S1. And the P1 with the S2 and just carry it on. There you go. Catching up on the chat. Time to buy more Vistas. The goggles, Tree Fiddly. Walksnail goggles better be Sky Zone. I've seen no evidence of Walksnail working with Sky Zone. So I would think any new product from Walksnail would either be made by Walksnail or would be based on an existing partnership, i.e. the Fat Shark one. If I was a betting man, and I don't know, genuinely I don't know, I would bet they would be all in-house. I don't see them working with Fat Shark on a V2 goggle. Run Camlink Plus. Talk about HD system, Nando asks. Have I heard anything from Orqa lately? No, last time I spoke to Orqa was over their hacking incident and nothing. I can see Orqa pulling out of general FPV. I think you'll see Orqa go the same way as Skydio and selling goggles to the military for £10,000 a pair. Waiting for the HDZero V2. You could argue people have had a V2 already, but no. Yeah, I think I spoke to Carl last week very briefly. I think Carl is, he's openly said he's working on the next iteration of the HDZero chipset. What that will mean is it'll give him more flexibility. When that will be, though, we don't know. You have to understand Carl is hardware limited in a lot of what his system can do. So if you take bandwidth, Carl can't have 50 megabits a second because his chipset is hardware radio. He can change stuff, but it isn't a full SDR. Carl is a very interesting mix of hardware and software, whereas DJI is very much completely SDR. They can do what they want within what the chipset can do. Carl can't go 50 megabits a second because he just doesn't have the bandwidth in his chipset. A version 2 maybe doesn't. The great thing Carl has is the absolute ability to bring something new but also retain backwards compatibility, and that's what I would hope we would see. You know, Carl is going to be, you know, Carl drew out that ASIC. I suspect he's drawing out the current one now. And he's got a lot of optimization he can do as well. You got to remember, HDZero was never designed for FPV. HDZero was designed for other wireless video streaming, VR, things like that. Carl never really anticipated having to have like a MIPI camera interface. So he's currently got to have a separate chipset for that. Any new chipset Carl could do, he could winding that MIPI chipset into the main chipset, which means he doesn't need that Texas Instrument. Is it TI? I think it's the TI one. He can wind more into the chipset. So he has a lot more capabilities that he can improve and optimize. I'm just going to blow my nose a minute, and I'm going to cut the audio so you guys can't hear. Sorry, I'm battling the end of man flu. Did it start with a sore throat and hurt when you coughed? Yeah, look, I had what I thought was very human malware, but it wasn't. I can't say your channel name. Is the Orqa F firmware drama already finally resolved? Any updates on how things went between his company and the hostile firmware dev? No, that's interesting, actually. I'll do a bit of digging on that this week. I haven't seen anything. Apparently, I believe the guy had been arrested, but I don't know how true it is. Yeah, AVI just said there are things Carl's working on for commercial applications that will never be an FPV product. Yeah, 100%. You know, FPV is never going to make Carl huge amounts of money. Hello, content. No one needs that. Human malware. The C word. I don't want to say it because I'll get demonetized. The thing that landed into that 2020. Human malware is my term for it. Yeah, well, I've had it 3 times. It would have been 4th if I had. Hence the reason I couldn't go to the drone thing in the England this week because I was ill. I was in bed. Okay. So if you have any questions, please do put them in the chat and I will try and answer it. I'm going to open this non-sponsored can of Pepsi. Arrogance. Is that just a random word? Carboni? Or does that come with abuse, or does that come with anything else? Oh, thank you. No way. I hope you'll be good soon. Yeah, I couldn't get down to. We had the drone thing in the UK in London, and I was meant to go. I had the day off work and everything, but I was in bed. Rough as you like. Am I right? 03 on V2 goggles is H264. We believe so, yes. We don't fully understand what DJI is doing with codecs because it's not published, but we do believe so. Yes. Okay, so we have 193 of you amazing people here, but 40 likes. Please do give us a like before we move forward. The next subject. Okay, Gemini. This week we saw something interesting. I think JB did a review on this. I wasn't sent one of these by BetaFPV, so I didn't do a review on it. But BetaFPV have released Gemini. Now, these are Express ELRS Gemini transmitter and receivers. Now, if you don't know what Gemini is, it's this really cool technology in Express ELRS, which basically doubles up the packets. So it sends twice as much out to try and avoid the fact Gemini, whichever we're going to call it, of interference on the band. Now, the first ones we have seen from this are BetaFPV. Now, before anyone says it, these are Express ELRS dev team endorsed products. They have been checked. They have been tested. So don't worry about that. But what you've got is... One second. Well, it seems I do have a Gemini receiver. Was I sent a transmitter for this? No. That's... Yeah, they bunged one of these in with the Pavo Pico, but they don't think they bunged in a transmitter. And I've just realised what it is. So, this is the Super P 14-channel RX 2.4 gig. This is the 2.4 gigs Gemini receiver, which I didn't actually realise they sent me. But I don't believe they sent me a transmitter. Now, they do have a standard receiver. Don't worry, it doesn't have to be this big. Now, for those who don't know, it basically is 2 receivers and 2 transmitters in one. So the system will transmit the same data, but on different hopping frequencies. And the idea is it's 2 times 2.4, as Gary has just said there. And the idea is if one packet doesn't make it through, the other packet does. Dual RF link, crazily stable, up to 1 watt of RF power. Express ELRS 3.3. And overall, it looks super, super interesting. Now, I'm really looking forward to having a look at this on the bench, on the spectrum analyzer. Now, there are some positives and there are some downsides. And none of this is BetaFPV. As far as I'm aware, BetaFPV have made a very nice set of kit here, which should work absolutely fine. The real sort of downside to this is that you're transmitting twice, which means you don't have twice the power, but you have more power consumptions. You will consume more power because you're transmitting twice as much. And that's the very basics of it. Now, overall, this is really designed to be a system that gives very good stability in congested RF environments. My personal opinion on this is, and if we look down here, antenna diversity, true diversity, and Gemini modes. So there are multiple modes available on this. So you've got single antenna, single packet, which is mode 1. 2 antennas, 1 active, single packet. That's basically the same as basic, but antenna diversity. So you're swapping between whichever antenna it feels is right. True diversity, 2 antennas, 2 active on the same frequency. And then you've got Gemini, 2 antennas active on dual frequencies. And what you're basically doing is creating 2 separate systems, hopping independently but linked together at the same time. And the immunity on it is huge if you look at the 5-star immunity. Now, more than anything, what this is going to do is give you real good stability in RF congested environments. In my opinion, you will have better outright range performance in clean RF environments with more power. So if we were to say 2-watt Express ELRS Ranger versus 1-watt Gemini, in clean RF environments, 2-watt would outperform the 1-watt. Where this gets really interesting is when your environment may be coming in and out of interference and you don't know it's going to be a clean environment, and part of the band might get noisy and part of the band won't. And what you would find is, if, for instance, you were flying long-range, overpopulated areas where there is Wi-Fi, cordless phones, and other stuff, Gemini will in all likelihood be the best option. Whereas if you were flying out-and-out long-range in areas where you would not expect there to be congestion, then 2 watts of RF power would behave better. Locally, Gemini is going to be absolutely bob on for flying around congested areas and flying around other pilots or areas where you want to make sure your signal gets through. So you want to be pushing through in Wi-Fi where, and if you imagine flying a Whoop, for instance, a something like the Flylens 85 around your little streets or your homes with all of the different Wi-Fi signals, right, off all of the houses, all on different channels where you don't know where they are, Gemini will probably be bob on. And I mean, it will probably be by far the best option. Because remember, in that scenario currently in Express ELRS, you might have a packet missed. So what you would then get is a loss of control input or a skipped input or a judded input as a result of that. So you would get jitter, let's just say, on the RC control input. Whereas with Gemini, or micro failsafe, with Gemini, you would just push on through and it would be fine. And I think the real benefit of Gemini is in-town flying and around places that you can't control what the other stuff does. And that's where Gemini is going to kick in. You don't want a signal that can be knocked out by Wi-Fi. Everything can be knocked out by Wi-Fi if it's 2.4 gigs. Obviously, if you want to go to 900 megs, then so be it. But 900 megs on a small aircraft, I think here's something really interesting. Gemini is going to be a very interesting option for small whoops and aircraft where you couldn't fit on Crossfire because of the antenna size. Gemini is going to be really interesting for that. Really interesting. And look, if we look at the BetaFPV website, what I've not seen... Right, let's look at their receiver. How small is the standard receiver? So the Super D Diversity... How small is that? Is this the... Yeah, so this is the Super D Diversity True Diversity receiver, which can do Gemini. That is... How small is that? Let's have a look. What's the weight? 1.1 grams. That is... For that, you've got a lot of options. A lot of options. You really do. I think that is going to be an incredible option. You know, this receiver here is big because this is PWM. Big benefit for racing. Yeah, I think yes and no. The only problem is you don't want everyone doing this in racing. You're just going to have havoc. To be honest, the best thing that could happen in racing was everyone has fixed channels. That would be the best thing to happen in racing. What you wouldn't want is 10 pilots flying with Gemini. But I think Gemini has some real interesting use cases, and it's going to be a very viable option for people who would like to fly something like Crossfire on very small aircraft, but can't. So instead, you're going to use something like Gemini that's going to give you the best of the both worlds. And that will push on through. Does Ghost do the same thing? Genuinely, I don't know. I genuinely don't know. Yeah, this isn't a data link, Peppermint. It's an RC link more than anything. Now, I didn't realize I had this receiver. No, Wi-Fi will never knock out Crossfire, but Crossfire won't fit on every aircraft. You know, we still have a 1 gram receiver here, 2 antennas, 2 whips. BetaFPV. So BetaFPV is the first to push this out. The hardware has been agreed by the ELRS devs, so you know, look, there should be no concerns here with firmware. It's not forked, it's not unofficial. Everything here is legit. Everything here is legit. So I need to order in one of these. I definitely need to order in one of these. Crossfire has a nano antenna. Yeah, well, you can use Crossfire, but some people don't want to use TBS. And some people don't want to use 900 megs. You know, there are other issues with 900 megs. Yeah, all the current dual chip receivers can use Gemini. Yeah, I don't think I have any. The radio mat can't because it's only 1 antenna diversity. Yes. Yeah, so the receivers would need to be full dual RF path. So just so people understand, the receivers that are compatible would need to be the ones with... So you've got a single ESP32, which is fine. But if we take a look at this side of the board, what you can see here is we have 2 SX1280s or 1281s, 2 PAs. So these are power amplified models. So it has a PA on the telemetry, and then it has to. So it's full dual RF paths, not just 2 antennas into one receiver. Is Gemini really needed on Whoops, who is having trouble typically with ExpressWise in neighborhoods? If it's not part of the AOS, it's not a good option. Yeah, but look, Nick, there's no one who'll know more than you on that. My thoughts are, I think, I'm also not really wanting to say about flying 5-inch quads around your neighbors as well. Really, what I should be saying is, if you're someone that flies around a lot of houses, doesn't have to be a Whoop, but if you're flying around a lot of properties, Gemini may be a good idea. My comments on Whoops were, I didn't really want to say people flying 5-inch quads around people's homes. It's not the done thing. I sort of went with Whoops. Safety aspect was where I was going on that one. Please don't fly 5-inch quads around your neighbours' houses. They will get upset. Especially if it's a Nazgul. It's bloody loud. Yeah, definitely. Nick, I can see Nick said Gemini being needed on commercial shoots around Metro. It's like anything where there's something you can't control. Because if you you really want to use 7-inch when flying around people. Yeah, you think about it. Gemini will win when there are parts of the band you can't control, where you don't know what is there. And that's the trick. And I am going to do a full video on Gemini when I get one in, and I'll show you it on the spectrum analyzer, and I'll show you the benefits of, when you look at the RF band, where your radio signal is getting chopped up, that's where the benefits will come in. I don't want to risk firing up the spectrum analyzer on a live stream because it's a very power hungry device in itself, CPU wise. But yeah, and look, if you think about where the RF signal is being interfered with, what is jumping over the RF signal? And actually, let me just look at something. I wonder, do I have... Let me just look at something a minute. Disc 2, live stream. Is there anything in here? No, it isn't. Scratch disk. I don't know where all of my RF stuff is. That I'll have some video on this already, actually. Loud pipes save lives. Yeah, 7-inch quad props. Yeah, it's more than anything. It's definitely a nice option. And if you look at the price of the receivers, it's not that much more. It's going to give you, the payoff is price. You're going to be, the payoff is battery usage. You're going to be paying in battery usage. That's what you're going to pay in. But really interesting to see. I suspect we will see others follow. I don't know about Radio Master. I've not heard from Radio Master on this. I'm hoping they do release some new products on this. It'd be great to see. It definitely would be good to see it as well. But yeah, anyway, where part of the band has risk of being chewed up. Part of the band has risk of... Like, I'm just trying to look here a minute. Let me just see if I can find something. Video archive, raw. No, it'll be under the... I'll have footage on 03 somewhere on this because 03... No, it's not that one there. That's 03 channels. No, it's not on that drive. I definitely... I'm running out of storage space on my drives. Gemini Zorro with 18650s would be nice. It would be very nice. But look, I will have a bit more of an in-depth video coming on it. I'll order I'll order from BetaFPV tonight. Are there any of these in the UK, I wonder? It'll be quicker than me getting it from China. I don't know if anyone knows if these are in the UK at all. It doesn't look like it. No. Gemini and a Zorro, lol. Yeah. Just catching up on the chat. Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see it and show the benefit. It's quite easy to show even without Gemini because I could just do it with 2 ExpressOS transmitters. But what you wouldn't know is the hot pattern. Gemini Ranger, big one. Yeah, Gemini Ranger would be very cool. Very cool indeed. Okay, so possibly, I don't know. Did you get, have they sent them out to everyone? I have no idea. The only person I actually, look, I haven't watched a lot of stuff recently because I've been tied up myself. Did everyone else get one? I don't know. Nick, have you got one? I seem to have a weird relationship with BetaFPV at times. They sent me the Pavo Pico, which was great. I think I did a good review on it. I liked the product. I did criticize it in some ways. I forgot they included this in with the box, actually. I'm just trying to make sure they didn't actually send me one. And let me just read my last email from BetaFPV. Let me just have a look. Last time I spoke to them, I asked about the new flight controller for the Pavo Pico. Oh, yeah, no, it was just the receiver. Not tried it. They probably don't like me then. I'll email them. I'll ask them if they can send me one. Let's see what they say. It is what it is. It's like, what's it cost? It's not end of the world. It really isn't. So I do. At the end of the day, look, it's you go through phases with companies where they but when it's ExpressOS getting Mavlink, yeah, I think ExpressOS is always going to be a tough one as a data stream. I don't think it's ever really going to want to be a full data stream back and forth like Mavlink, like the RF900 radios and stuff like that. Yeah, it's going to be I don't think it's ever going to be the perfect one. Okay, now before we end this stream later on, we've got a bit of time yet. Quickly, I just want to talk about the new SpeedyBee flight stack. I did put a video out this week. It's not a review because I haven't flown it. But I do want to comment on a few things because there were some people asking questions around some of the stuff, especially on iNav. So for those who haven't seen BetaFPV, SpeedyBee have banged out a frankly astonishing $70 flight stack with an F405, which is really good. And my understanding is they have resolved all of the issues around black box, and they have resolved all of the issues around iNav and D-Shot. It's all working fine, as far as I'm aware. They are... Yeah, I have had a few companies get upset with me. Nick says it happens. You can only be you, can't you, Nick? That's all you can be. People either like what you say or they don't. What can you do? At the end of the day, all that matters is if you're honest. And as long as you're honest with the audience, at the end of the day, fuck the manufacturers. They like it, they don't. They want to work with me, they don't. That is what it is. What I'll say is if a manufacturer is genuine, they'll take the criticism and feedback in the right way. And here's an example of that before I move on to this. Cadex FPV. People can say what they want about Cadex, right? People can say about Cadex Walksnail anything they want. I have annihilated them over that system in the early days. Yeah, all they did was, hey, we've seen your feedback. We appreciate the comments. Is there anything else you'd like to add so we can bring it to the devs? We're going to give you some feedback based on what you've said. By the way, here's a firmware. Would you want to give it a try? There are a million things you could say about Cadex in the sense of the way they behave at times, but genuinely, with the release of Avatar, they have been nothing but absolutely willing to listen to everything I've said and work with me afterwards. Absolutely. And I literally told everyone, don't buy this. DJI, on the other hand, won't talk to me. So that tells you everything you need to know. Anyway, SpeedyBee F405. Ridiculous price. Yeah, what's not to like? At the end of the day, what's not to like? I haven't flown it yet. It's going to go in a build. I don't really see any problems. Although there has been a lot of people talking about the gyro, which is the ICM. Which one is it? It's the ICM. There apparently is a lot of chatter about the ICM 42688P right now, and I need to have a chat with Sugar K and find out what's going on, because there's a lot of people talking about this gyro, and I'm not fully aware of if there's issues with it or not. I didn't think there was, but apparently there is. What they have, though, done is put their own specific LDO or their own basic voltage regulator on it, and that should help the overall performance. But I think for the money, you can't knock it. A question that was put to me, and I think is very interesting, is, okay, so the ESC is BL Heli S. Okay? So not BL Heli 32. Obviously, licensing. Why, though? Why are people not shipping with Blue Jay? Now, here's a question I don't have the answer to. Why are manufacturers not instead shipping the ESC with Blue Jay rather than BL Heli 32? Do we think this is because there's just not enough known about Blue Jay? Do they think if they write comes with Blue Jay, people will be like, I don't know what that is? Do we think they're just playing off the BL Heli 32 name? You know, us BL Heli S, BL Heli 32. Most people don't really understand the differences between the two. But I don't really understand why they're not shipping with Blue Jay when it is by far the best option. Could 0.2 be the reason? Potentially. Something else on the horizon? Newer Blue Jay 1.7... Newer Blue Jay Vision 1.7 to now has some issues with certain ESCs too. Interesting. Blue Jay with the Death March tune and send it. Hummingbird ships a Blue Jay. Yeah. I think it's SEO. And that's my thought, Captain Bry. That someone would search for and then they can just swap firmware. Yeah, and that's what I'm thinking. It's interesting, though, isn't it? It's very, very... There was a problem with that gyro in the early days as well as the gyro, and it was with the flight controllers not having proper filtering voltage regulation for that specific gyro. That's what I thought, Zach. That's where I was at with it. I knew there was early days issues with some filtering and some power requirements, but yeah. I need to go. Nick, I need dinner here. Household is getting hungry. Hamburgers. Oh, very nice. Corn on the grill. Nick, it was an absolute privilege to have you here, my friend. All the very best. Yeah, it's definitely much better, but nothing comes with it. Yeah, it's really weird, isn't it? Why BL Heli S seems to be the one that everyone is shipping with, yeah, you want to go with Blue Jay. I'm having a brain fart here. Does the current BL Heli 32 support RPM filtering? Or, well, bidirectional G-shot. I can't remember. Wasn't it patched in? Am I being... I need to remember off the top of my... I'm having a bit of a brain fart moment. I thought it... Wasn't it patched in? Or not? Or am I thinking of something else? I thought it was patched in. Yeah, I'm not going mad. I can't remember, does the current version come with it? Because that would be the big stumbling block for people. AM32 Skystar stack, I think. Yeah, that's a... Did BL Heli S... has it been patched in? I can't remember. No, it doesn't. I thought there was a patched firmware, but was that just something that was pushed out? I can't remember if it was released or was it just a patch that was done and not released as an update. I need to check. It's been a while since I looked at this. I haven't flown BL Heli S for a while. I do remember. Yeah, this is it. I remember. BL Heli 32, yeah, that's right. See, Captain Bryce said, I remember there was like a Maverick firmware that had it. Yeah, that's it. I just can't remember, though. Was it official or was it... Yeah, this is the thing. It's all very murky to remember, isn't it? Should we have a look? It should be, in theory, in the Git, shouldn't it? Releases. Oh, God. Are you telling me it's not in the list? We're on BitDump BL Heli S. Am I on the right one, yeah? March 2020. Clifffields, BL Heli... Pardon my ignorance, but wasn't it to do with 32-bit versus lower bit? I can't remember. I've actually forgotten, and this is the problem. There's an RC groups thread for BL Heli S. We're in the master branch. What's nice is there's no releases. It really is a bloody mess. I test firmware for the M32. Super smooth for cruisers, but not there for ultra fat tech. Yeah, Jazz Maverick. Was that the branch? No, Mike Keller. Mike Keller's got a branch. So what have we got here? BitDump Master. Wait there. Do I need to go to BitDump? Yeah, that's what I'm trying to figure out. BL Heli. Sweet. Let me just download this and see what it says. BL Heli 32 suite. Wait a minute. Is it the same suite? Do you know what? I'm having a brain fart. I think it's been ages since I've actually looked at this. Right, if we go to BitDump. Yeah, latest BL Heli 32 does. Ah, so wait there, Chris Hayes. Jazz Maverick is another free BL Heli 32S firmware option. Warning, some Jazz Mavericks BL Heli S firmware versions do not work well. The 16, okay, so yeah, it's been a while. It has been a while since I remember this. It just feels that's BL Heli 32 suite. So where the hell is BL Heli S? Let's have a look on the last page of RC groups. Have they? When was the last post on? Of course, it's been a while, isn't it? Yeah, it's a confusing mess. You're better off. ESC configurator. And use this to be able to fly Blue Jay. AM32 as well is coming along. But yeah, BL Heli 32. There's not a lot of info here on it. I cannot remember. BL Heli S, no bidirectional D shot. Okay. So they never had it. I thought it got patched in, but I'm wrong. Sad, really, that why has BL Heli S just not been pushed forward? Clearly, because of problems like this. Make sure you roll back to 19.2. Okay, interesting. Cool, right. So, it's time if you've got any questions. Please do put them in the chat and I will try and answer them. I want to say a big thank you to the 2 super chats we've had so far and the 81 likes. Yeah, you won't find anything for the 32. It's just I can't really see much for BL Heli S. That's what's frustrating is, you know, you got 32 and S. I'm not really seeing anything for S. No pull requests. You've got open and closed tickets in BL Heli. But it's all very much kept behind closed doors. I don't even think about BL. Yeah, the annoyance with BL Heli S is that all these cheaper ESCs are shipping with them out the box. And I would really like that to stop if it's just not worth doing. That's the thing. What are the best settings in the goggles for Goggles 2 and Vista? So, this is actually quite an interesting question because someone asked this on Facebook earlier and they didn't believe me. And this will be coming in a video, but there is still a huge misunderstanding of the low latency modes on the Goggles 2, Air Unit and Vista and 03 compared to the old system. Now, Goggles 2 and Integra with the Air Unit and Vista is easy because you can select high and low latency mode. But Goggles 2 and Vista with 03 is more complicated. And most people don't still fully understand what modes you get low latency and what modes you get high latency. Now, I will have a video coming on this, but just to show you this chart, this is the basis of actual latency testing done on the O3 system with 1,000 frames a second camera. Now, the first thing to understand is O3 will only give you low latency mode in the following modes. On Goggles 2 and Integra, 100 frames a second. Resolution dependent, it is not. So 4K 100, 2.7K 100, and 1080p 100 on the Goggles 2 and Integra is the only mode that is low latency. 30 frames a second, 50 frames a second, 60 frames a second, 120 frames a second are high latency. To give you an idea of the actual latency numbers, this chart has them, and this will be coming in a video. This is actual average latency measured. This isn't a DJI number. This is my own data taken on an average of 10 runs at a time. So whilst you shouldn't go, oh, it is exactly 26 or this, it is within error of this. So for instance, if we ignore 1080p and 2.7K a minute and just look at 4K, 4K 30 on the Goggles 2 gives you 53 milliseconds of latency. 4K 50 gives you 49. 4K 60 gives you 44. 4K 100 is the low latency mode. That gives you 26 milliseconds on average of latency. And then 4K 120 jumps back to 49. The only mode on O3 that is low latency with the Goggles 2 and Integra is 100 frames a second. Everything else is much, much higher. The same is actually on the V2s, but I haven't finished the testing yet, so the data isn't there. But the low latency modes are 100 and 120 frames a second. Okay? It's not 100 on its own, it's 120, and that is because the V2 goggles will do 120, even 144 hertz on the displays. The Goggles 2 can't. So on the V2 goggles, you are only getting low latency on the 100 and 120 modes. Dan has asked, is this fixed latency? No. This is best case scenario on the bench with a run-to-run variance. So there are 10 runs on each of these done with 1,000 frames a second camera, measuring the LED being turned on in the camera view and the LED being turned on the display. I have a special rig for doing this, and that is an average. So 26 milliseconds is an average. Here's where it does get interesting, is when I start showing you these charts, okay? So these charts are actually based on the data. And here is where things get a little bit more interesting, okay? So this chart here gives you the lows and the highs. So say 10 runs, what the lowest latency was and what the highest latency was. So for instance, if we look at Goggles 2 on O3 at 100 frames a second, the lowest of my runs was 26 milliseconds. The highest of my runs was 34 milliseconds. If you look at O3 at 30 frames a second, you can actually get highs as high as 69 milliseconds, but on average of 42. Now, this is where it gets very interesting, is the V2 goggles on the Vista in low latency mode, because you can actually get down as low as 18 milliseconds, as high as 30, but the average of 20. What is then also interesting on the rest of this chart is when you start looking at the other systems versus it on latency. When we start looking at other latency numbers on the Avatar HD and HDZero. So, for instance, here is another real interesting one. Goggles 2 on 03 at 100 frames a second, you're averaging 26. Goggles V2 on the Vista. Goggles 2 with the Vista is averaging 32 milliseconds, but the absolute best is V2 in the La Vista, which is averaging 20 milliseconds, but can be as low as 18. The V2s with the Vista is the lowest. Well, the V2s in low latency mode, 03 or Vista, it's the same. Oh, sorry. Air unit or Vista is actually the same, but in low latency mode is the lowest on DJI. Yeah, it's the same on the original air unit. It's no different. I labeled it Vista just because I tested Vista. I tested the Vista and the air unit, and it's the same, so I just went with Vista. But it's the same. It's the same. Air unit and Vista. Air unit and Vista on V2 goggles on low latency, or V1 goggles on low latency mode, is by far the lowest latency on DJI. 03 is averaging 26 milliseconds, even in the best case scenario. But where 03 falls apart is when you start looking at 03 in 30 frames a second. It is horrific in 30 frames a second. And then if you look at the lowest latency variable FPV systems, and HDZero isn't in this yet. So the absolute lowest is the V2s with the Vista in low latency mode. Avatar is already in here. All the Avatar data is already in this. I haven't done HDZero yet. Then the next lowest latency on average is Avatar HD in 100 frames a second at 24. So if you look at Avatar 24, 100 frames a second, and that's on the goggles, not the VRX. Avatar does not, in my tests, get down as low as DJI at all on average. Avatar hovers higher on average. 90, 100. They're actually they're running at 100 on Avatar HD. They've clocked them at 100. They originally said 90 and then they clocked them to 100. And then if you look up here for the full latency from low to high, is you got those charts there with the other system there. And again, the worst is DJI 03 on 30 frames a second. But this is the bit people don't really understand with 03, is the fundamental difference in 03's performance depending on the mode. And this is the big compromise on 03. If you want to film in 30 frames a second, Goggles 2, 30 frames a second, because you want cinematic footage, you could be averaging 53 milliseconds of latency. The highest of any system. And this is why, if you remember, Steele, he got rid of 03 because he said it was juddery and couldn't use it. And you know why he got rid of 03? Because it was juddery and he couldn't use it? Because he was mostly flying in 30 frames a second mode because that's what he wanted to film in. And that's why it was like this. That's why Mr. Steele couldn't use it, because he said it was juddery and it was all over the place, and it is horrific. Yeah, well, he got rid of the Goggles 2, and that's because of this. Because if you take into account Goggles 2, but it's going to be the same on the V2s in those modes. But I've got to do all the V2 testing. But yeah, this is the problem. The Goggles 2 so O3 is compromised on the recording modes versus the latency modes. And 30 frames a second is horrible on O3. It is all over the place. Mads 05 Shark Zone V1. Yeah, based on my comments earlier, I won't be selling FPV products. I have a product that I have designed in my head. I'm gonna talk about this before the end of the stream, and I can talk about it. So if it gets stolen from here, I can say it was my idea. But yeah, so I've just got to get the V2. Have I done the V2 data? Let me just have a look. I can't remember if I've done the V2 data yet or not. Oh, I have actually done some of the V2 data. Oh, no, I have done the V2 data. Oh, no, sorry. I've done the V2 data on the Vista. I've not done the V2 data on O3. That's what it is. Yeah, I've got to do the V2 data on thing. But yeah, if people want to know the scary numbers of the O3 latency, that is it there. Global source, 30 frames a second in O3 is the first time I've had borderline puke level of motion sickness in it. It's pretty bad. But yeah, that gives you an idea. It really does. Now, it's a long process. It takes a lot of time to do. And that's why I've got to get it finished. Camera on the outside of the goggles. How the testing is done, C-Mac. So the testing is done with this. This is a Sony ZV-1 version 1, which I bought for doing this. 600 gig camera nonetheless, which does 1000 frames a second. And what you actually do is I have made an adapter that allows this to go into the goggles. And what you do is you shine an LED on. There's two LEDs, in fact. So two LEDs come on at exactly the same time. And before anyone says, how do you know both LEDs come on at exactly the same time? Trust me. You fire a pair of LEDs off a power button, the same power button, they come on at the same time. I've checked it with 1000 frames a second camera. Right? Okay. There isn't even a millisecond of difference in it. Okay? So I can tell you that. And then what you're doing is you're seeing two differences. And let me see if I can find a piece of the footage, because it's actually really interesting to show it. Because you see both LEDs come on is what you see. And you see the first LED, and then you count the frames to the second LED is what you do. So if we go into Marge Drive, and then Raw. Now, the question is, where have I put this? 1 second. Let me just plug a drive in. Always dodgy ground, plugging a drive in on a live stream. Let's see what happens here. Okay, so Raw Archive. Right, what the hell have I done with the latency testing videos? DJI Foam, O3 Cal. No, it's not that one. Let's check it's not actually in my OBS folder. No, it's not in that one. Let me check it's... Ah, here it is. Found it. Found it. No, that's the actual recording of the video. Let me show you this. Okay, so here we go. This is cool. So what I'm about to show you here is you're looking here. Actually, let me do one other thing. Let me put it in Resolve. I need it in Resolve so I can step it forward. 2 seconds. Because what I can't do in that video program is step it forward one pace at a time. So let me just put it into resolve a minute so you guys can see it. New project. Latency. There we go. Okay, so let me bring this into here. And bring this into the timeline. Okay, so. Now, is this one actually one that works? Yes, it is. So, okay. So what you're seeing here is the recording inside the goggles. So that thing in the middle you're actually seeing is the front LED. And what you can't see is there's a second LED up here. Okay. So this LED here, you can't see, is actually in the lens of the camera. And this LED here is looking into the camera, this LED up here is into the lens of the actual camera, this camera. And this LED here is into the lens of the FPV camera. They are not together. So when I step forward, right, let me just move forward a minute to the point. I need to find the point where it kicks in. Okay, so what you're about to see is the first thing you're going to see is the LED come on. Both LEDs will come on at the same time. But remember, there's a delay on the second LED because that's the latency of the system. So if I move forward a minute until we get it, wait a minute. It'll be here now. Wait a minute. It'll kick in any second now. Let me find it. The point of no return. We're about to hit it. There. Right. Okay. So one step, we're about to come on. So that there is the LED coming on at the filming camera point. That is point 1. So we then count forward how many frames it is until the second LED comes on, because this camera is 1,000 frames a second. Each frame is 1 millisecond, so we're able to count forward. So, for instance, that's point 1. So we're now going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32. Note, at 32, there's a change at the bottom of the display. Can you see the colours changing? 32. That is the first pixel kicking in. Because remember, the display refresh rate is not synced to my camera or the FPV camera. So that is the first point the system is starting to display. So that is the first point of the latency. So 32 milliseconds. It's that point there. Then we go 33, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. That is the point which I would then class full frame. So 32. So 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42. 42 milliseconds to full frame. 32 milliseconds to first pixel. So the average latency then is of them. Now, what you're seeing here is, remember, at this point, right, now, at this point in time, that LED in the middle is fully bright. It's on, because the LED doesn't come on like a rolling shutter. What you're seeing here is the rolling... Yes, 32 frames is 32 milliseconds because it's 1,000 frames a second. So it's 32 milliseconds. 32 frames is 32 milliseconds. Nice and easy to calculate. So at this point, the second you see that there, the light is on. But what we now have is the delay of the refresh rate of the display as well as the reading of the camera. Because remember, the camera is reading in. It's not a global shutter. The camera is reading in line by line. The display is then buffering that and then writing that to the display as well. So what you're seeing is that LED is already fully lit, but now is this delay of the buffering on the camera side and the buffering. So you've got almost 10 milliseconds of delay of getting that image to the display. That data is in the system now because we can see it. It's there. Look, it's not there. It's there. It's not there. It's there. It's now really there. And it's really, really there. So the processing the data to get it to your eyes is 10 milliseconds. On top of the amount of system latency. But remember, the way DJI rolls in is like that. And then you'll see it roll, and then it'll come out the other side in a second. 2 seconds. Let's just see it running. And what that banding is the difference in frame rate. The display's 100 hertz. I know, is this V? I can't remember if this is V2 or which one. The display is 100 hertz because it makes a full frame in 10 milliseconds. Yes. But 10 milliseconds is so fast. But the problem you have is what you have to understand is what is the point of... So if we just go here a minute. So at this point, let's imagine, right? This is where it gets interesting. So imagine at this point, a branch appears in the bottom part of the screen here where my mouse is. A branch has appeared in your view. Before that branch would enter the camera view, so at that point we've seen it, but the branch is there. But look, the image isn't coming in to that point until now. So 10 milliseconds later, that branch has entered your eye line. Now, if that branch was up here, you'd see it 1 millisecond later. You would have that branch 1 millisecond later. So the way these systems work, it's not even as simple as how long the latency takes to move through the system. It's in fact how the image is presented to you in the goggles and what the readout order of that is. And where the obstacle that you're wanting to see is in relation to the readout of the display. Because that can be 10 milliseconds of difference, potentially. It's a very interesting and complicated subject. Pitch quality equals latency. Yeah, it's a minefield. But the biggest problem is people don't fully understand how O3 works, and that's what the problem is. So, anyway, we've been going way too long. We've done the 2 hours. I'm going to wrap this one up. I want to say a massive thank you to everyone who has donated a super chat. There was another one came in New Zealand dollars. Thank you for that. It was $5 New Zealand. I really do appreciate that. You're an absolute star. Thank you, Cliff Field. Field? I need to move that monitor closer. My eyesight's getting worse. I want to say a big thank you for spending some time with me tonight. Stay safe. Look after yourself. We will be back same time, same place next week. If you're new here, please don't forget to give it a like before you go. If you don't know, I do have a Discord. Come over, say hello, send me some abuse. Stay safe. I'm glad the stream held up. Oh, I've lost my mouse pointer. I can't even end it gracefully. Good luck finding a barn. Yeah, there ain't a lot down here. Stay safe. I'll speak to you soon.